Nobody planned this. That's the sentence. The one nobody's saying on television right now. Not the bombs, not the missiles, not the warships with their official statements and their announcement tweets. Those you saw coming. Those had press conferences. What ends empires is never the war someone planned. It's the accident. The 90 seconds nobody designed. The call made by someone whose name you will never know, never see on television, never read in any history book. Someone with a radio, a formation of ships off the bow, and 90 seconds to decide. That's where we are today, my friends. Let's talk through it. April 2026, Islamabad, Pakistan. The United States and Iran are sitting at the same table. Pakistan is mediating. China is watching. Russia is watching. 21 hours of talks, the whole world holding its breath. Peace, progress, maybe. And right in the middle of those 21 hours, the US Navy sends 2 destroyers toward the Strait of Hormuz. Not before the talks, not after, during. And here is the detail that buries the headline. These ships didn't fly American colors. They ran electronic warfare, false vessel identification. They disguised themselves as commercial shipping from Oman. Think about that for a second. The self-appointed guardian of the rules-based international order was running a fake ID operation through a contested military chokepoint, while its own diplomats were shaking hands 60 miles away. Iran caught them, locked cruise missiles, sent drones overhead, gave a 30-minute warning. The destroyers reversed course. The talks collapsed. No wonder. Now, first detractor of the day.
Come on, this is just Trump. He tweets something insane at sunrise and walks it back by dinner. Theater, noise, nothing ever actually happens.
I've heard this one a lot, usually delivered with the confidence of someone who just discovered geopolitics last Tuesday. Here's what's actually going on. When your diplomatic apparatus and your military apparatus stop coordinating, that is not theater. That is not strategy. That is a government that can no longer get its own departments to run the same play. Vance is in Islamabad doing the words. The Navy is in the Strait doing the opposite. At the same time, apparently under different orders. That is not good cop, bad cop. That is not even good cop, bad cop with a plan. That is institutional breakdown, live, in real time, inside a nuclear-armed superpower. Pick the word you prefer. Just don't pick nothing's happening. Then the blockade announcements came, and this is where it gets almost funny, in a dark, deeply uncomfortable kind of funny. Trump announces, the United States will blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Let me share a small fact with you. Iran already controls the Strait of Hormuz. They mined it strategically in a way that, according to the New York Times, not Iranian state media, not Russian outlets, the New York Times, cannot even be fully demined by Iran itself. That was the design. They have IRGC escort formations running tanker traffic, coastal missile batteries, drone coverage overhead. They demonstrated twice publicly with US Navy ships in the starring role that they can lock weapons onto American destroyers and watch them reverse course. So the United States announcing it will now blockade a waterway that Iran is already running, it's a little like showing up to take over a restaurant and finding out the other guy already owns the building, employs all the staff, and has the locks changed. You're not blockading anything, pal. You're just arriving late to your own press release. Enter second detractor.
Okay, fine, Hormuz, shipping lanes. I'm trying to pay my rent, man. I've got my own problems. What does some narrow strip of water on the other side of the planet have to do with me?
Fair, completely legitimate question. Everything. 20% of the world's oil moves through that 33-kilometer stretch of water every single day. Your gas, your heating, the truck delivering groceries to the store near you, all of it tied to a bottleneck most people couldn't find on a map half a year ago. But that's not the accident. That's just the stakes, the table. Here is the accident. Right now, today, you have 2 armed parties both claiming authority over the same shipping lane. Iran says, our rules. United States says, our rules. And in the middle of these two competing rule sets, there is a Chinese tanker, a Russian-flagged vessel, an Indian cargo ship, vessels from countries that did not sign up for this war, that did not agree to either set of rules, that simply need to move cargo. So they approach the strait. Iranian IRGC patrol formation on one side, US Navy destroyer on the other. The captain of that Chinese tanker looks left, then looks right, picks a lane. And somewhere in that formation, a 26-year-old lieutenant on a US ship has approximately 90 seconds. Is that Iranian escort formation a threat? Hold position? Radio up the chain of command? Is there a time to radio up the chain of command? Nobody planned second 91. There is only 90 seconds. Hit subscribe and ring the bell before we go any further, because the next part is what every mainstream outlet has completely missed, and it explains why the United States has almost no clean exit from any of this right now. Don't go anywhere. Third voice, the pragmatists.
China is too smart for this. They reroute their tankers. They need global stability. They're not going to let a 26-year-old lieutenant drag them into war.
Correct. China does need stability. China also has $1 trillion trade relationship running through and around the Persian Gulf, and China has been quietly, without flags, without announcement tweets, reportedly providing Iran with targeting intelligence, drone manufacturing technology, and reportedly starting to supply air defense systems. Now ask yourself a different question. What does Beijing do the morning a US destroyer stops, boards, or fires on a Chinese-flagged vessel? Under international maritime law, that vessel is Chinese sovereign territory. You didn't board a tanker, you boarded China. And now this isn't a US-Iran conflict anymore. Suddenly, it's something with a much longer name, and consequences that make the Strait of Hormuz look like a warm-up. Enter fourth voice, the Iran is finished crowd.
Their infrastructure is rubble. Their military is decimated. They're begging for a deal. They have no leverage. They'll take whatever terms they are given.
This one always makes me smile. Well, at least just a little. Here is what the strikes actually accomplished. The generation that wanted to negotiate, the pro-Western Iranians, the pragmatists, the ones who spent 40 years not building nuclear weapons even when they could, the ones who sat across Western diplomatic tables in actual good faith, that generation is largely gone, dead, exiled, or politically finished. Some of them are killed in the very negotiating party that took place right before the war. The generation that replaced them was formed in the Iran-Iraq War, at 17 years old, watching friends die in a conflict that started with a foreign invasion backed by foreign patrons. You don't produce negotiators from that experience. You produce people who will hold a minefield for as long as necessary. Their missile inventory is intact. Their IRGC naval forces are intact. And here is one more thing the headlines consistently skip over. Iran sits on an estimated $35 trillion in natural resource wealth, fifth or sixth richest nation on earth by underground assets. That's not a country without leverage. That's a country the other side needs something from, desperately, badly, and structurally cannot stop needing. Enter the fifth voice, my personal favorite.
The ceasefire is holding. Talks will resume. Cooler heads always prevail. Stop fear-mongering.
I genuinely hope you're right, and I mean that without irony. But let's talk about what cooler heads actually requires in this specific situation. It requires the US diplomatic layer and the US military layer to get back on the same page. They demonstrably are not. It requires Israel to stop attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. Iran made that an explicit ceasefire condition. Israel has continued. And it requires vessels from uninvolved nations to navigate a double custody checkpoint, Iran's rules and America's rules, simultaneously applied to the same physical space without a single incident. Every transit, no mistakes, no misread signals, no radio call that takes 11 seconds too long. One incident, just one. And the cooler heads are on television explaining it. So, where does all this actually leave us? A US government with a diplomatic layer and a military layer running on different instructions. Not bad faith, something more structurally unsettling than bad faith, disconnection. A proposed blockade of something Iran already controls. That's not strategy. A government trying to talk itself back into relevance over a waterway it lost the operational argument for. a choke point with two sets of rules and a growing queue of vessels from countries with their own navies, their own governments, and their own red lines. And one more layer most analysts are not discussing. Before the strikes began, Iran sat at the crossroads of a trade corridor connecting Russia, Iran, and India, a network that would route commerce outside Western financial infrastructure. Much of what the strikes targeted was that network: ports, rail lines, bridges, the connective tissue of an emerging architecture the West is trying to prevent. If you can't regime change a country, you can at least destroy its connections to the map being built around you. Iran knows what was targeted. Russia knows what was targeted. China knows. India knows. Which means this is not just about a ceasefire. This is about who draws the next map of global trade. And that map is being drawn right now, as we speak, in the rubble, and in the decision rooms of Beijing, Moscow, and New Delhi. The full regional breakdown, who holds what leverage, where the next pressure point emerges, and what the realistic outcomes actually look like, that's on the Substack. Link is in the description. And if this channel is giving you real tools to understand what's happening out there, consider Patreon. That's what keeps this independent and answering to nobody but facts. One last thing, and then you can form your own conclusions. The most catastrophic conflicts in history were not started by the most dangerous leaders. They were started by exhausted men in impossible situations, given 90 seconds and insufficient information, making decisions that nobody at the top had authorized. Sarajevo, 1914. Not a declaration, not a summit breakdown, not a villain with a plan. One wrong turn by a driver who did not know the route. One man with a pistol who wasn't supposed to still be in the position. A month later, World War I. Nobody planned this. The question is not whether Washington wants World War III. The question is whether a system built on two competing rule sets, one impossibly narrow choke point, multiple uninvited parties with their own flags and their own governments, and a 90-second decision window, whether that system is structurally capable of not producing one. Look at what they've assembled, and then you tell me. This is a wrap for today, my friends. I'll see you next week.